I'm Sam. I'm here to talk about elevating government search with Vertex AI and Drupal. Just quick show of hands, who here has actually heard of Vertex AI before? Couple? All right, so this will be nice and new for folks. I'm Sam Lerner. I'm a team tech lead and technical architect at Civic Actions. I've been there 10 years, but I've been building websites about 27 years, Drupal for about 18. Been working with search for about 16 of it, been to 7 DrupalCons. This is my second GovCon and first time presenting. So, making some history here. Just to give you a bit of background on what I've been doing, I've been using Google and Drupal since 2008. Started out with views and the Google Search Appliance. I don't know if folks remember that. It was a $30,000 box filled with Google's magic. Continued on when Google started a JSON API for their services. They recently, in 2024, rebranded it as part of their Google Vertex AI system. And I've been doing this work for government, nonprofit, and private client websites. So while I am going to be talking a lot about Google, I don't want this to seem like one giant endorsement of Google. The things I'm talking about really apply to any sort of major search service, like Bing or Yahoo or anything like that. But I've been working with Google, so I'm here to share my experience with it. And let's dive into it. Okay, well, first, before we get into too much, I want to differentiate between two kinds of searches. There's data searches and content searches. A data search, in my mind, is more like with a spreadsheet, where things are numeric or simple, and you want filters, so you're filtering down the information to get what you want. A content search is when someone wants to know something. So they type something in a box and hit enter and hope to get it. And on government websites, you may have noticed sometimes that doesn't work. So, and by doesn't work, we're tapping into something I'm going to talk about a bit here, which is really expectations. Because in my experience, and again, going back 16 years, it's always been the same problem. You build a search, client sees the search results, and they tell you they're not correct for some reason. You then make some tweaks to what the search does, you go back, and you start right over again. And you continue for who knows how long. And it constantly becomes a battle of how do I get search results to be correct? And they'll come back with things like just saying, oh, the search just doesn't work. Or they'll say the results, they're not correct. And what usually ends up happening is they'll say, well, I just left the site, went to another search engine, and came back. And that is, in fact, one of the major metrics that I've used in the past to verify whether or not what I'm doing is actually helping. How many times someone goes to a search and then stays on the site because they clicked a search result versus doing a search or 2 or 3, leaving, going to Google, and then coming right back. And the hard part about this is that a correct search result is an opinion. It can be a lot of different things. It depends how relevant it is to the person. And sometimes clients can have some really off-kilter requests. I had a client once ask if the results could be in alphabetical order. I have had clients go, well, I searched for this ingredient in a recipe, but I see it's an ingredient in the recipe, but it's not in the title, so it shouldn't have come up. So that's not correct. And again, it's just endless trying to figure out what is it that will actually satisfy them, and is this actually what's best for the end users? And the problem here is expectations. Back in 2008, when I started, search engines returned a certain quality of results. If we look back on it now, we'd go, man, that was terrible, because now it's 2025. And every year, as these search engines get better and better and better, people's expectations of what a good search result gets more and more and more. And it becomes harder and harder for people to do it because these companies have thousands of people with billions of dollars and done decades of research. Really hard to compete with that. Same way it's hard to compete with hedge fund managers if you're just kind of doing your own stocks. So when you use something like Vertex AI and you're leaning on an established search surface, you kind of end that conversation of what is correct because you're, in a way, giving up the responsibility of coming up to the correct answers for this other company that theoretically should be able to do it better than you can. So something like Vertex AI is going to best meet the expectations of their users because it's the same technology that they probably just leave your website to go use anyway. So what is Google's Vertex AI search? So first a note, Google Vertex AI is an entire suite of lots of different offerings. Search happens to just be one of them. And in fact, it was its own thing. The Google JSON API was its own thing. And then in 2024, Google kind of grouped it in together with a lot of other things and stuck it under the title of Vertex AI. But specifically, it's the Vertex AI search that we're looking at. And what it is essentially like a Google search, but filtered down to your domain. So I don't know if folks have tried this, but if you go into Google and do site, and then a domain name, and then your query, the only results you're going to get are from that domain name. So if you did site, irs.gov, investment, only results from irs.gov are going to come back. And that's more or less what this search does, is it gives you the power of Google focused on your domain. And I say here the AI part is mostly marketing, in that there are AI tools that go along with Vertex. There is a chatbot service, there is a suggestions and things like that. But this is just the web search. It doesn't really involve anything quote AI. But honestly, if Google Maps had never existed and they just released it now, they'd probably call it Google Maps AI.
Right.
Because that's how it goes. So here's an example. It might be a little small, but you don't really need to get into the details. But this is essentially what happens. You query their API, you give it whatever terms you're looking for, and it comes back with what you would see on Google, but in JSON format. It's got an array of results, tells you how many there are. This is sort of split into 2 pages, but you can see it gives you sort of the links to it, some of the meta information and stuff like that. And then you can just use this to do whatever you want and display it however you want on your site. So, what are the advantages of using this service? So, like I said before, biggest issue with searches is bounces. People go, they search, don't find what they look for, go to a different, bigger search, find what they look for, come back to your site. This, they don't have to do that. They stay right on there. And that makes them feel better when they're actually on the site and they're finding what they're looking for. That's a really accomplished thing on a government website. But it also is more than just a keyword search. There are services, things like Apache Solar and stuff, that try and do more advanced things. But things like basic Drupal search, it's about keywords. It's about, are they finding that word? But with Google, it's not just keywords. It's concepts. It's, if you're looking for something with money and you're talking about investments, it might know, okay, you might be talking about taxes because it's tax season. So it's getting results based on more than just the keywords they type. It's kind of what they were thinking of and trying to look for initially, which is a much better experience. It also handles things like spelling mistakes and typos. It will do that where, if you do a typo, it'll say, did you mean to search for this? And then give you an option to go right to that search. Or it might just go, I think you actually really just meant this, and I'm giving you the search results for this instead, because the other thing didn't have any results. So more than just being able to figure out what they're searching for, it helps them if in case they make some sort of mistakes. So really what they want, not just what they're typing. Another good thing is, when it comes to relevancy, people are always like, hey, this search result is too low, or not, how can you get it up to the top? There are ways of tweaking things, but the basic thing you're working with is SEO. The better SEO you have, the higher a result it's going to be, because that's how these search engines work. So if you're seeing results that you don't want, you can update your content to better have it render. And that's going to help you not only on your internal search, but on external Google searches as well. So the effort of trying to get things ranked better isn't just for you, it's better for the whole site. And also, because this is an external search service, there's no Drupal indexing. There's no additional database. There's no extra strain on Drupal other than the API queries that you have to make. So you're offloading a huge amount of work from your database to another company that's spent billions on doing this. All right, complications. Of course, everything can't be perfect, and there are issues to deal with when you're working with a tool like this. Like I said, you're giving up a certain amount of control in order to get all of the goodness of Google. So one thing that often happens is sometimes there's a search result that you go, we don't want that. That got indexed by accident. You're not able to just go in and click and remove something like that. There are tools like Google's Search Console where you basically say, I didn't want this, unindex this, get rid of it. But that's not, again, an immediate thing. So there's often a period of time as you're getting started where you're going, I'm seeing things here that I don't like. I might need to make some tweaks here to individual content. Another thing that we find very interesting is the result numbers are not consistent. Like normally if you do a search, you're going to get 200 results. It's always going to be 200 results. But Google's changing. They are updating the rate of results based on your content, people's reaction to it, how they're clicking, what they're doing, interacting. So the total number of results ends up not being consistent even as you're in the same page. And what we found is that this really messes with paging, because if you keep paging, eventually you might hit a page with nothing on it because the amount of results reduced somewhere in there. So we've done a number of things, and we've found with some user research that these are actually better in ways. One of them, don't print the total number of results. That just scares people. If you see 10,000 results, people are going to go, I'm never going to go through all this. If they see 7 results, they're going to go, that's not enough. Just tell them, here's your results, 1 through 10, go for it. Also, paging in and of itself, I think is kind of an antiquated system, especially on something like this. Who has ever been to page 12 of search results? No, there's page 1, maybe page 2, and if you're frustrated, page 3. But if it's not on those first 2 pages, it's not even a good search to begin with. So we just put up more results, and that'll take you to a few more and kind of go from there. But again, if you're past 20 results, something might be wrong. Another thing that's kind of tricky is because it's Google indexing your site externally, it's not aware of Drupal-specific things like fields and content types and taxonomy and stuff like that. So, things like Apache Solr Search, you can tie directly in and make things like facets and stuff like that. It's a little bit more difficult for that. But again, it's really expecting you to just type in what you want, and it should figure it out based on your site content. And there are ways of adding more information. Another thing about Vertex AI is it's changing all the time. I'm sure there is a new feature since I started this presentation. Yeah. And something they are working on is facets. Some method of being able to take meta information and use it as part of the search query. You can also add more meta information in your sitemap. Sitemap.xml allows for specific tags that allow you to add more information there that Google will take into account. Again, this stuff is kind of a work in progress, but there are ways of doing it. And again, if your content is structured well enough, it shouldn't even need to know things like content types. You should just be getting the right thing right away. All right, so how do we get set up? What do we do? First, you need a Google Cloud account. And I'm not going to get into much detail here because we could spend hours in here. But again, it's a big suite of all these different offerings that Google has, and within that there is Vertex AI, and within that there is the website search. So you would need to get an account, and then you need to verify that you are the owner of a domain. Like, I can't set up a Vertex search for irs.gov. I don't work for them. I don't maintain that. You have to be able to prove it. So there's a little bit of setup there to just verify, yes, this is my domain, so you can let me do what I want with this stuff. Again, not going to get into too much detail. You can ask questions afterwards if you want to know more. But once you do that, one of the key things is when you set this up, you set up what's called a data store, and that is where you configure your domain. So you say, I want to include, I'm just using IRS, I don't contract for the IRS, but I'm just using it for an example. I would say include everything from www.irs.gov. Here you can also have exclusions. So you could say, I have a whole bunch of glossary terms I don't want. Exclude irs.gov/glossary or something like that. So there's another way of being able to tune kind of the content you want in and out of your search. So, assuming you've done all that, you've got all of your things ready to go, now it's time to go back to Drupal. So there's a couple modules. The main one is the Vertex AI search one. This basically came out of custom code that was wrapped around how to actually deal with the API. So the module, which I'll go into a little bit later, helps you with configuration, authentication, and then some of the sort of settings that go along with it. There's a second module for promoted results. What this does, this exists almost entirely outside of the actual API, but basically it allows you to pick keywords, and if those keywords are part of the search, add in an additional result at the very top that you can style differently with a specific title and URL. So, during tax season, you could say if someone searches for this tax form, always put this thing right at the top, because we really know that we want people to go here. Again, if your search results are good enough, you might not need it, but this sort of thing is handy if you really want to make sure that someone sees something. Also, a coworker of mine, Timo Zura, has done a ridiculously good job of documenting this stuff. I would highly recommend you look at it. It's very detailed, very well done. It will explain a lot of things about how it works and all the different features. So highly recommend you take a look at that stuff too. All right. Once that's all installed, now you actually set things up. So if you're using this just as part of your Drupal site, it exists as a search page. So it's the same way you would set up your user search, your basic content search, and so forth. Gives you the option for a Vertex AI search, which means that this is built within Drupal using their sort of search page configuration, which keeps things pretty consistent.
Sorry, you literally core search API.
Yep. So you go right to configuration, search pages, add a new search page. It will say that it does not index, but you just make it your default and you're good to go. Alternately, if say you have a headless Drupal site, you can use this to create a endpoint that you can then use from something like a React app or some other application. And so your site acts as sort of the authentication piece, and then now other tools can use it. As you can see, we're using basic auth here so that people don't abuse that endpoint, but it gives you just sort of another way of dealing in case you have a headless Drupal site. All right, I'm going to sort of breeze through these different settings just to give you a general idea. There are a lot there, and this is a constantly being worked on module, so there may be new things even as of this presentation. A few features are, there's an autocomplete feature. Enables you to basically turn it on and add it as part of sort of the core search. Trigger length is an important one. It's basically how many characters do you type before it kicks in. You usually want something around 3 or 4, because if it starts trying to do something in the first 2 characters, it just kind of bugs people. You can list the max suggestions. Then there's a simple autocomplete, which is kind of sort of Drupal's built-in thing, and then Vertex has its own autocomplete API. The thing about this, actually, this is kind of important. So there is a cost associated with this. It's by the 10,000 queries is a certain amount of money. Not all that much. The autocomplete API does not cost money, which is great, because otherwise, as somebody is typing, they could do 12 queries if they're typing something long. So the autocomplete doesn't count against that, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Again, since this is a search page, it's got display options. Won't go through all of it, but you can see there's lots of different ways that you can change the different display. A few things that are of note on the top right here: remove domain from result link URL. So by default, all the results you get back have the domain that you want, which probably makes sense. But let's say you're on a lower environment. You don't want all your links pointing to production. Easy fix. You take everything in the URL, chop off the entire domain. Now all the links are relative. Now it'll work fine on all the lower environments. So that was just something kind of handy that we found. There's a couple different fields for configuring different styles and accessibility things if necessary. There's There's also a few filtering options. What we've found is that if you give the American public a text field on a government website, people will type anything into it. So we want to make sure that people are being safe while they do these things. So there's a JavaScript sort of, and a lot of this is basically just to prevent people from accidentally putting in PII or something like that. So the JavaScript one will work as they are typing and kind of notify them, hey, something about this looks like a social security number. Are you sure you want to put this in? Because again, the American public will put anything into a text field. There's also an exclusion list if you want to pick out certain words that you don't want queries to come up for whatever reason. And then there's filters, which is basically another way of sort of adjusting the way that results come back. So you don't have to use everything that comes back verbatim. There's also a flood control feature. This is kind of handy. It basically means that it will track searches by IP address, and if too many of them are happening in too small of a window, it will block that person from making requests for a certain amount of time. It'll just, anytime that person does a search, stop them, won't even query Google, just say, hey, nope, you gotta wait, settle down. Handy for deflecting bots, because again, there's a cost associated with each search. You don't want a bot swarm ruining your day. Then there's a bunch of different fields for basically altering the text surrounding it. They use tokens, so things like the results for. There's a whole bunch of other ones that I didn't actually list, but you can see at the bottom there's no results message. Basically lets you configure all the different messaging that goes along with the search page. And some advanced settings. These ones are kind of interesting. So the transport option lets you go between basic REST and gRPC. Without getting into too much detail, gRPC is preferred, but on some hosts, there can be issues with the version of it installed and it won't work, and you might need to fall back on something like REST. Only a situation you might run into if you start seeing some problems, so hopefully you'll never have to. But use gRPC if you can. And then this last one for disable queries to the Google API. Let's say you needed to do a ton of testing or even load testing. You don't want to be load testing against Google's actual API. So if you flick on this setting, everything works as normal, but every query will always return a stock example result. Basically like fixtures.
So you've got fixtures baked into the module already.
Exactly. Because there are situations where, again, you want to test sort of the functionality, but you don't want to be driving up costs.
Those are stock fixtures, and we could replace them with actual content from our site?
At this point, I think it's just one kind of hard-coded thing, but being able to use custom would definitely be a good feature to add. Because, yeah, but for the moment, this was basically a way of preventing pen testing teams from totally driving up costs by hitting search a whole lot. All right, so this is the promoted search results module. Again, it's really kind of completely external. It just sort of combines with the search, where if it sees a keyword in what people are typing, it will post up one or more promoted results. You get to pick the title, the link, the text. So again, if you just really want to advertise something, even no matter what. All right. So conclusion here. Again, it's about expectations, because what is a correct or incorrect search result is totally based on people's own opinion of what they should be seeing. But usually those opinions are based on the big search engines that people are used to using. So if what you are providing is analogous to what they're used to using out there, you're actually meeting their expectations. So, we don't want to give them a search that doesn't meet their needs. People are tired of that. They're really, really tired of that. You don't want to have to cycle endlessly with your stakeholders about what is correct and incorrect, because that just wastes time and will never end. And again, 16 years, it's been happening the entire time. And you don't want to have to spend time maintaining the logic yourself, slightly tweaking, is the title more points or less points, and weights and all this other stuff. You just go, Google's going to do it. We'll figure out on top of that, but they do most of the work. So let the companies use all of their resources, all their people, all their money to do all this work for you, and you just kind of leverage it. And then, if you do have to do things like change ranking, use SEO. Everyone benefits. Also, the search companies themselves are maintaining it, so it's not another service, another API that you have to maintain, another point of failure, and all this other stuff. And I think that's it. I breezed through this pretty quickly. Questions?
So I have a question and then a request.
Cool.
Question first. So there was a session earlier on bad behaving bot traffic and how to mitigate it. So does this help with that problem?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
without the flood control, I guess is my question.
Well, we're used to using CDNs and stuff like that try and handle the bot stuff initially. The flood control will definitely tamper things down, especially because if you saw the presentation earlier, it's really getting harder and harder to identify what a bad bot or something is. So at least with the flood control, and then if you tie in some sort of like alerting to when those messages start getting logged, you can be like, oh, something's definitely not good here, and then take more action from there. But yeah, I mean, honestly, most of the issues we've had with like too much traffic come from like internal sources that we kind of have to deal with. So that's why that like turn off request to Google feature was added.
So the request is, I know the Wi-Fi is can you show us this in action? Because I've never seen what the results are.
Yeah, unfortunately, the folks that I work with would rather not be identified. I had so many cool examples and stuff like that, but unfortunately I can't. But yeah, I mean, the before and after is kind of staggering. Like, even on advanced, solar searches, searching for things like, again, like tax forms or like enrollment in healthcare or, other things like that, you'd be surprised. I mean, it's pretty incredible, like how off kilter the search results can be, and then you see something from Google and you're like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted.
So I'll ask the follow-up to that and then stop.
Mm-hmm.
So does it give you like the AI snippet too?
That is extra. So there is that feature somewhere in the Vertex AI ecosystem. We haven't been using that sort of stuff because the content we're dealing with is highly regulated, and so generating that content for front-end users is not exactly what folks want. But given the environment, given that already most of the major search engines are already summarizing things for you, as time goes on, government tends to warm up to things that are becoming more and more prevalent.
So this looks great. However, we would not be able to use it for our internal sites, and that's one thing we're trying to do is optimize for internal sites, non-public information.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for those other than we can't have nice things?
Yeah. I mean, one of the crux of this is that there is a Google Vertex bot that needs to be able to crawl around your site and find stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on a way of, being able to supply that bot with authentication so it could get in there. That starts to raise kind of, data privacy concerns. Like, do you want Google actually going in there in the first place? But yeah, at the moment, I don't know of anything offhand for internal things. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if they were
Would you be
thinking
able
of
to
it.
export it all in JSON and just upload it to your data stores?
That is, okay, so that's actually a good point. So again, Vertex AI search is really Vertex AI website search.
Yeah.
And the website is the data store that belongs to the application in Google Vertex that you then work with. But the data store can be of many different types. There's BigQuery ones. We've had situations where you can feed it XML or JSON directly. So while this one web search tool might not be what you want, there are other ways of providing Google that information into a data store and then being able to query from it directly there. Question? Very good question. It definitely replaces Acquia Search. So Acquia Search is Apache Solr. I actually worked with the person who originally built it and then sold it to Acquia back in the day, so me and Acquia Search go way back. But yeah, it's Solr, so it's something that even though Acquia hosts the actual Solr cores, you need to manage the logic of it and all the stuff like that. The one thing Acquia Search does do that Vertex doesn't at the moment, is facets. Whether that's a good thing or not, up to you, but faceted search is definitely something that, we're having a little bit of trouble using Vertex to replace, but we're getting there. You, sir.
As an Acme rep in the room, just to add a little flavor to that. Earlier this year, Acme started replacing its internally hosted solar infrastructure with search stacks.
Yep.
So you can have AI-powered features like the smart answers and some of those things. So it's a moving target, I would say, from a feature standpoint.
Yeah. Acquia Search is definitely undergoing some big upgrades now. I think part of the problem was they were on an old version of Solar for a long time, but the infrastructure is finally starting to catch up. And yeah, Search Stacks is going to offer like a whole new set of stuff. So yeah, I work with clients who work with Acquia hosting a lot. So yeah, we're keeping tabs on that stuff. So,
does it work with a multi-site search? So if you have one top-level property and then all you want to have results from lots of subdomains or whatever.
Yeah. Each data store, each website data store is based on domains. So you can either do one domain, or let's say you want, michigan.edu is one search, michigan.edu/admissions is another one. And so you can make multiple data stores, and each one has their own identification, and then you can make multiple Vertex AI search pages and then use them however you want. So you could have a search just for this one section of your website, or multiple searches for different domains, as long as you're able to verify you manage those domains.
So and it can roll up to like a one search to rule
Yep.
all the domains.
Can
Okay.
the relationship between an agent and data source be many to one or one to
Oh.
one?
Yeah.
Blended search.
Yeah, they basically took a very simple thing and put it into their entire complicated ecosystem. So now it does a whole bunch. Yep.
So you mentioned, so this is through Drupal's core search pages, but all the actual indexing is being done externally through bots on the site.
Correct.
Okay, so I have a couple of different sites. Some have frequent content updates daily. Some very, long time between the updates.
Mhm.
Is there like a fine-grained control of how often these bots can crawl the sites so they're not hitting the sites that aren't getting updates and really don't need to be indexed?
The bot control is mostly dictated by the same rules as any, search bot indexing the site. It respects robots.txt. In terms of frequency, you could use something like sitemap.xml to designate, roughly how often content's updated. That can sort of have an effect. We have noticed that initially when you set it up, there is a lot of crawling, but you don't necessarily are able to say do this now. I will say that, Google Search Console tools, stuff like that kind of overlaps. You can sort of say hey, this content's been updated, try and go and re-index this. Again, you're giving up some control to Google to be able to have all these nice things, but we haven't found too many issues with over-indexing because the bot's going crazy on it.
Gotcha. And do you know, 'cause I know Google often gives users some free tiers and credits to play with. Do you know if Vertex, if we wanted to play with that, if it falls into that free category?
I think so, yeah. I mean, again, usually things are charged in the tens of thousands of queries, so I think if you just create a Google Cloud account, you can start going in and kind of playing around with this stuff without, incurring a cost right away.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah.
Documents, PDFs, is it?
Yeah, so anything Google can
Let's see.
index,
Yep.
it will. If you don't want all your PDFs showing up in results, you can exclude, star.pdf. But by default, because it's a Google search bot, it will read the entire PDF and index it along with everything else. So anything a crawler can get to can be on your search results. Anybody else? Alrighty, well that's it for me. Oh wait, one more. That's a tough comparison because the Acquia search service is sort of bundled into their contracts, whereas this is kind of its own discrete thing, and you have a billing account with Google Cloud for this and whatever other features you're using. But I haven't heard any complaints, even with sites that get like 30,000 searches, a week. So seems to be pretty minimal, and the cost of not having to deal with a bad search certainly makes it worth it.
Do you know if it performs the same in different languages? So if someone's using Chinese characters, it's going to be...
Yep, we've done it on websites in Spanish. It'll do anything like that. So it'll handle any language that Google search normally does. Anything else? Alrighty, thank you everyone.